3 games in an entire year might sound a little sparse, but for shooting games being officially released on a deceased console, well, that's pretty dense, isn't it? So, what's better than taking a look at the last 2 Dreamcast shooters of 2004? Well, how about breaking the seal on them? What was it like to open a Sega Dreamcast game in Japan back in 2004? How about digging into a limited edition? Well, we're gonna find out. Starting with the Shikigami no Shiro 2 limited edition, and then we're taking a look at the new best cable for your Dreamcast, which we lovingly call the God Cable. Let's kick this one off in a big way with the Shikigami no Shiro 2 limited edition by Alpha System. The whole limited package is enshrouded in a perfectly shrink-wrapped plastic that almost looks as if it isn't even there. Removing this allows players to remove the game and the special soundtrack disc from a cardboard slipcover. Dreamcast games, like a lot of Japanese CD-based media, have a handy tearaway strip allowing players to get the goods out of their cellophane tombs rather easily. Inside the audio case, players will find a small packet of collectible cards, each with a calendar on the back and a tasteful piece of Shikigami no Shiro art on the front. Chaos Field, on the other hand, is much less involved, though it too has a tearaway strip for easy opening. So, let's take a closer look at these 2 titles. Surprisingly, the Dreamcast release of Shikigami no Shiro 2, despite being based on Naomi hardware, is the 3rd home release of the game, coming after GameCube and PlayStation 2, but before the original Xbox release. Like the GameCube and Xbox versions, the Dreamcast version was only released in Japan. The special edition slipcover might have a wider side panel due to the 2 CD jewel cases housed inside, but the front and rear panels feature the same art and information as the standard edition of the game, save for the lack of an obi and a couple of lines regarding the limited nature of the package, its soundtrack CD, and included calendar cards. As such, the front cover of the manual features the main protagonist Kotaro, back-to-back with the main antagonist Shintaro. Every version of this game from the Dreamcast to PS2 to GameCube to Xbox has a different cover, but we have to admit, this is probably our favorite of them. Things get even better on the back of the manual with a collage of the forces of good and the forces of evil presented side by side. Shikigami no Shiro 2 also includes an obi, which features plain red text that, well, ends up being really redundant. There's not much more to interpret on this block of text, unfortunately. As is typically the case, all of the game's supported accessories are listed on the back of the obi, and of course, VGA is supported. The soundtrack CD has a picture disc label that once again mimics the slipcover and manual's front image, while the insert does the same for the manual's rear art, only this time wrapped around the fold. There's no rear insert panel this time around, showing only the disc, but the inside of the liners look fantastic with an awesome shade of blue. Shikigami no Shiro 2's calendar cards are nice collectible bits that serve no purpose outside of their art these days. The calendar is, after all, for April 2004 to March 2005. They look pretty cool though. Onto the main game disc, it has a kind of color scheme that we really dig. Another rendition of Ko and Shin stenciled in blue and white. This is one of her favorite Dreamcast discs to date. On the rear panel, there isn't a ton to see outside of some screenshots and a couple of blurbs hyping up the Dreamcast version of Shikigami no Shiro 2 as the best, most complete version of the game to be made. What a difference a year makes. Castle Shikigami 2 has a lot of exposition and features strong art direction, so it's once again no surprise that the layout of the manual is nicely put together with a good amount of lore, bios, and great pieces of character art. For over 10 years, we've laughed at 2 Homes and 7 Moms, and we knew that we had to see how the Japanese version of this game fared after what we unintentionally discovered on the PlayStation 2 version over 10 years ago. 2 Homes and 7 Moms literally does exist as it turns out, but the context and delivery is much more appropriate this time around. It makes the great gameplay that much more enjoyable, so Dreamcast shooting fans shouldn't be too disappointed. We took a look at the PlayStation 2 version of Shikigami no Shiro 2 in episode... oh well, yeah, all the way back in episode 2 of Bullet Heaven. Despite more or less having a one-to-one translation, XS Games really botched its transition by keeping things as literal as possible with no localization or interpretation whatsoever, which itself is actually really nothing compared to the voice acting, which was horrendous. But in the end, it was a decent title with an emphasis on bullet grazing to not only boost attack power, but also trigger multipliers for huge score boosts. While the Japanese version does inherently lack the complete what the f**k value of the US release's VO, it does still feature the tight, excellent gameplay and dynamic story interactions with 1 or 2 players found in the arcade release. Like Ikaruga, the Dreamcast version in specific has better live sound, which actually comes across much clearer than the PlayStation 2 version we took a look at all those years ago. With Tate support in tow, as well as a ton of options not present in the original arcade version, Shikigami no Shiro 2 is a game that is sure to entertain while being taken much more seriously than the North American entries to the series up to that point. Released in December of 2004, Chaos Field is the first entry of 3 Dreamcast titles from developer Milestone. It would make its way to the GameCube and PlayStation 2, as well as the Wii and Xbox 360 in several Milestone game collections. The Dreamcast version in specific, though, was only released in Japan. Chaos Field's front cover kind of elicits a bit of an Ikaruga vibe in a lot of ways, despite really being nothing like Treasure's masterpiece. It does look pretty cool though. But if you thought that was great, just wait until you see the back of the manual. Haha, just kidding, there's nothing to see here outside of a small amount of contact information. The OB is on the simple side as well, with plain black text running the length of the card. The rear panel, as always, displays all of the compatible accessories that can be used with the game. VGA is, at this point, obviously supported. But check out this disc! It may look simple, but the black stenciling on only about half of it and the small white Milestone logo on the bottom accentuate what is otherwise a bare disc in great ways. It comes together to make for one of the coolest Dreamcast discs we've seen so far. Due to the white spindle panel holding the disc, there is no internal art once again, but the rear cover is simple and well laid out with small blocks of information about Chaos Field's main features. As always, the manual informs players of the finer details of Chaos Field's controls, features, and character bios. It works for basic information about the game, and at the very least, it's all in color. Chaos Field put Milestone on the board for its shooting games, and while it was never as highly regarded as their later titles, it is, if nothing else, an interesting addition to the Dreamcast's post-death official shooting history. As it turns out, it's also the third to final Dreamcast shooting game to see release with a standard CD jewel case. Chaos Field flows more like a boss rush than that of a regular shooting game, having players take on 2 sub-boss phases and 1 major boss in every stage. The main hook to the gameplay here is how players can shift between 2 different fields, the Order Field and the Chaos Field. The Order Field is more tame and typically used to build up power to better deal with the enemies at hand with special abilities and attacks. The Chaos Field amps up the player's firepower but also the enemies. A boss can be cleared much quicker here, but there's also far less safety. Collected power can be used to deploy special wing layer abilities that allow players to be defensive while launching their attacks. Collected power can also be used to perform lock-on shots which home in on enemies in order, but also most shots in chaos. Chaos Field also introduces a bullet-clearing blade, a feature which would be used in many of Milestone's games in similar ways. Featuring a thumping techno soundtrack and solid 3D visuals, better Wii feel than the GameCube version that made its way to North America in 2005, its presentation is really solid. But as Milestone's premier release, Chaos Field is rough. The concept is neat, but in practice it's not especially fun. However, it definitely stands apart from every other previous shooting game on the Dreamcast and set the precedent for many more to come. So we've established that VGA is a great way to go when it comes to capturing footage for all of our Dreamcast games, though getting there has been a bit complicated. Originally, we stuck with the BBS Gecko and its direct HDMI connection. It worked better than our Demolo VGA box, and we thought it couldn't get better. We also took a look at the Pound Dreamcast to HDMI solution, which offered a more affordable, albeit less clear option for players looking for a cheap, easy interface for their HDTVs at 480p. But both options did not support games like Bangai-O or Gunbird 2 and locked in at a stretched 16:9 playfield unless the players had the means to squish it in. No problem for us, but it was an issue for others. But then, an OSSC allowed us to use the BBS Toro for even sharper, clearer 960p footage, with an auto aspect ratio built right in. However, it was messy. VGA boxes use a 3.5mm audio cable for sound, and the Toro was no exception, except it needed an RCA to 3.5mm cable solution, which are less common and have more ends for use on the OSSC. But it gets even better. We received this, the Dreamcast 480p RGB SCART cable from retrogamingcables.co.uk. This amazing cable ditches the need for a VGA box altogether, granting the same resolution as VGA over one single direct line. It can be used with the FrameMeister using a EuroSCART adapter, but also with the OSSC with a direct connection. Best of all, no additional audio cables are required, as the Dreamcast sound is carried through the SCART connection. A switch on the Dreamcast end allows players to select between 576i to play games that don't support the resolutions displayed over VGA, and 480p for anything else that is VGA compatible. With 480p engaged, an orange LED will turn on when the Dreamcast is powered up. Many older monitors that employ SCART may not support 480p though, so leaving it set to 576i will suffice. Depending on the game and method of upscaling, this one cable is all players need to get the best out of their Dreamcast without mods of any kind. Just plug and play. Games like Captain Tomade, Bangai-O, and Gunbird 2 can be upscaled cleanly to 1080p on the FrameMeister or line doubled up to 5 times using the OSSC for the same resolution for that extra crisp, super chunky retro image. But for VGA games, the FrameMeister has a bit of a harder time. The image will still be pretty blurry as a result of how the FrameMeister handles a 480p signal. However, a line-doubled signal through the OSSC allows for the next best thing, 960p. Bear in mind that this 960p image can only be viewed on certain televisions and most Full HD and above computer monitors. For more on that, be sure to check out our OSSC feature coming soon. Simply put, if players are looking for the best way to play their Dreamcast games in high definition and they have the means to upscale their picture or interface with SCART, the Retro Gaming Cable's Dreamcast 480p SCART cable is the cleanest, highest quality, and simplest way to do it. It's very easy to see why we call it the God Cable. And nobody should really be without their own, so to get one, be sure to follow the link in the description below. Two more for the Japan Matrix. Not many more for the pure shooters, but many more borderliners await. Once again, there are no new entries for the North American Matrix. More on that coming soon. The homebrew Matrix is also unchanged, for now. The end of the Dreamcast official support is within sight, and if you thought we've seen everything the Dreamcast can do when it comes to its shmups, well, just wait until we check out the rise of Triangle Service, the genesis of a long-running milestone series, and G-Rev's final Dreamcast release, one of the very best looking games on the system bar none. See you in the next episode.